Welcome to your instant reaction. Andy Staples on 3, presented by Wendy's. Welcome back. College football week 1 began in earnest. And of course, the game everybody could not rip their eyes away from. Boulder, Colorado, North Dakota State putting a scare into the Buffaloes. But Colorado making a tackle just short of the goal line as time expired in a game that reminded us of a couple things. Travis Hunter is unlike anybody we've ever seen unless we are really, really old. Like if you're 90 years old and you watched college football when everybody played both ways, then by all means, you can talk about all the guys you saw playing both ways the whole game and how great they were. What Travis Hunter is doing is freaking incredible. And I realize he did it all last season, but let's do it again. Let's remember how incredible this is, because we have not seen anything like this in a while. He caught 7 passes for 132 yards, 3 touchdowns, and played most of the snaps at corner. The third touchdown, the body control was amazing, and it was on 3rd down, and there's a good chance Colorado doesn't win the game if he doesn't catch that pass. So that's something we got to think about and talk about. Like, I don't care if Colorado goes 4-8 again. If he does this every game, give the man the Heisman. Now, will Colorado go 4-8 again? I said I think they're going to make a bowl game this year. I might have to revise that after what we saw tonight. Look, we all know North Dakota State's really good. We know they're one of the best FCS programs, but they still have 63 scholarship players. They still don't have anywhere near the athletes that Colorado should have. And Colorado obviously has very premium athletes in Travis Hunter, in Shedeur Sanders, and Jimmy Horn. But it still shouldn't be this close as good as North Dakota State is. Like, North Dakota State covered in this game. They covered the spread. Colorado's going to play a lot better athletes next week against Nebraska. Now, are they going to play a better quarterback? I don't know. Cam Miller was really good. Dylan Raiola might wind up being a great quarterback. He's starting his 2nd game in that game. He'll be playing against UTEP on Saturday. So that's the question. Now, I see a lot of you in the chat saying rigged. I got it. I was yelling at the TV too when the ref is spotting the ball and the clock is running when it shouldn't be running. So North Dakota State did lose a few seconds there. Colorado gifted them some seconds. That's another thing with Colorado that we got to talk about, because the play calling, so we were wondering how Pat Shurmur would do as Colorado's offensive coordinator, and we're, jury's still going to be out. Obviously, they threw for a ton of yards. Shedeur Sanders, 24 of 26 passes completed for 445 yards and 4 TDs. North Dakota State could not cover Colorado's best receivers. Just could not cover them. But when Colorado needed to run the ball, there was one nice Charlie Offerdahl run for a 1st down, but for the most part, they couldn't run the ball when they needed to. There was a 4th and 1 play earlier in the game. North Dakota State stuffed them, and you saw Deion turn to Pat Shurmur on the sideline like, what was that? What was that? They got to get that figured out. Now, what they did do well was protect Shedeur Sanders. I believe it was 1 sack, maybe 2. But as some of you are pointing out in the chat, Shedeur was taking a lot of hits late in the game. And so they were getting to him eventually. They were not getting to him in time to get him down. And I think that's what saved Colorado. But Shedeur can't keep taking that many hits. By the way, as we're talking about this Colorado game, North Carolina, Minnesota playing a tight one in Minneapolis. Minnesota's up 1, and Max Johnson for North Carolina is out. And oh, by the way, North Carolina just pinned the Gophers on their own 1. So this one's going to be fun. We've had a lot of fun. A lot of fun because the Colorado-North Dakota State game was awesome. Western Carolina gave North Carolina State all they could handle for 3.5 quarters. NC State finally came back in the fourth quarter and put it away. But Cole Gonzalez and the Catamounts were slinging it. But back to Colorado. So, again, Travis Hunter, we have not seen this in most of our lifetimes. I'm just like, my jaw was on the floor. Second touchdown catch and third touchdown catch. And I know a lot of you are going to say that the second touchdown catch was a push off, but felt like mutual combat to me. And he just got the ball. Tony Yayo, how did Jordan Seaton look? Not bad. Not bad, but they didn't do much in the run game when they needed to. And that part, like, the offensive line is to blame for that as well. But they did protect Shedeur Sanders fairly well. And the thing is, what you saw, if they protect Shedeur Sanders, they have a chance. But that defense has got to be better too. Hurley Waples in the chat, Colorado has a lot of room for improvement. That's exactly right. They do. Defensively, they got to be better. They gave up 11.2 yards per pass attempt. Cam Miller, again, veteran quarterback, knew what he was doing. You saw him able to get out of trouble, find open receivers, but also get out of trouble and find open grass. Like, he was able to, if he could escape the pocket, he was going to gain yards. He gained 81 yards on the ground, scored 2 touchdowns on the ground, including a long run where basically all the Colorado DBs had just turned their backs, and he took off. So that part, Colorado has got to get fixed, because when they play competent offenses, they're going to have problems. Nebraska, again, we do not know if Nebraska is a competent offense. We will find out a little more about Nebraska against UTEP on Saturday, but I don't know that we're going to find out that much. Corporate Duck asked the question, did Colorado look that much different from last year? Talk about the same problems we were last year. Yes, except for the protection. Again, because they got to Shedeur more last year. But again, that could be because this defensive line is not as athletic as the one they're going to see next week. You know, they're going to see the vanilla gorilla next week. They're going to see the polar bear next week, Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmacher. Like, those guys from the middle, from the interior, can get tons of pressure. So that's going to be a problem. Zach in the chat, good point. What are Gus and KJ and the Knights going to do to them in a few weeks in the September Florida Heat? Not to mention Avery Johnson, Cam Rising, Ollie Gordon. Exactly. These are people who can run the ball really well, with the exception of Ollie Gordon, who is Oklahoma State's best running back. Those are all quarterbacks who can run. And by the way, speaking of Cam Rising, how great was it to see Cam Rising and Brant Keithy back playing for Utah on Thursday night? They just crushed Southern Utah, but great to see them back. But you're right. Unless Colorado can shore some things up, and you know, a lot of times when you're playing man coverage, if you do lose the quarterback in the pocket, he can go for a long time. So the question is, are they comfortable enough playing zone, or do they want to play man the whole time? You're going to risk that unless you can get the quarterback on the ground. And that's something that Deion definitely was positive about, the guys he brought in on the D-line. And I thought when North Dakota State called run plays, not scrambling, not Cam Miller scrambling, escaping, but when North Dakota State ran design runs, I thought Colorado did a good job against those. I thought the defensive linemen were destroying blocks. They were, by the way, block destruction, one of my favorite terms. Our guy Roddy Jones used it a few times in the broadcast. Love that. So, but they were engaging in block destruction on those plays, moving the line of scrimmage back, making it very hard for North Dakota State to run when it wanted to. Now, when North Dakota State didn't want to run, when they wanted to throw and they flushed Cam Miller out of the pocket, that's where Cam Miller did the damage. So I'm curious to see how do they improve from week 1 to week 2. Because again, the thing about this Colorado team, especially on the two lines of scrimmage. This is their first time playing together in a game. So you are going to get some improvement from game 1 to game 2. With North Dakota State, a lot of those guys have played together for a long time. With Nebraska next week, that defense has played together for a while. The offense, again, true freshman quarterback. By the way, we've got a review in the North Carolina-Minnesota game. Looks like the ball's out. Looks like North Carolina's got the ball in Minnesota territory. We're about to find out. We got Mike Pereira breaking it down. So this is going to be a fun season. But what we could see from Colorado is a lot of games like this. We could see a ton of shootouts. Like Colorado averaged 13.1 yards per pass attempt. That is insane. Now, they're going to play defenses that have better athletes on the back end than North Dakota State. That said, I'm not sure who's going to cover Travis Hunter. Like, who's going to be able to stop Travis Hunter? And I think, we kept asking all these questions. Mark Jones on the broadcast asked Roddy Jones this, and they had tried to quiz the NFL scouts who were in attendance at the game to say, hey, what's this guy's position in the NFL? I'm saying receiver. I'm just saying it right now. Like, I want that. You heard him talking after the game, Travis Hunter, about going to the coaches and saying, hey, on this big play, get it to me. Trust me. That's your guy. Like, I want him at receiver. We've seen games last year where there were receivers who could go against Travis Hunter, the cornerback, and have success. But I don't know if Travis Hunter in the NFL is just playing receiver, then I like his odds against most people. Now, it'll be interesting. Like, what if Bill Belichick gets a job next year? Like, remember Troy Brown? He'd play Troy Brown both ways. Like, if Bill Belichick got Travis Hunter, he'd play him both ways too. A lot of you in the chat saying Colorado looks like the same team as last season. Halfway Rich. I don't know if it's exactly the same, but maybe. Because again, it's hard to tell. Like, North Dakota State is an FCS opponent, but a very different brand of FCS opponent, a much better brand of FCS opponent. So I look at this as basically playing against a good group of 5 team that happens to have 63 scholarships. Elevation says, I don't think Colorado lacks the talent. It was Colorado getting out coached on the defensive side. Too much confusion in the Colorado defense. I think I'd agree with that. Although I would also say that there were a lot of coverage busts on the North Dakota State side. Now they had to play a lot of zone because they're not covering those guys one-on-one. When Colorado gets to the teams that can play them more man, and Nebraska is probably one of those, what does that change? How much does that change? I can't wait for that Colorado-Nebraska game. Because if Shedeur Sanders is chucking it deep, and Dylan, I don't think they just completely unleash Dylan Raiola, but we'll see. I mean, we'll see him play against UTEP, and we'll have a better idea of what we think Matt Rhule is going to be willing to do. But I would imagine they stay conservative because that defense is so good. By the way, we thought we might have another fumble in Nebraska, Minnesota. We did not. In North Dakota, Minnesota, or North Carolina, Minnesota. I'll get it out eventually. The Tar Heels retain possession, kick a field goal. They now have a 16-14 lead. So this was going down to the wire. Big quiz about Nebraska. They lost to Colorado a year ago. Yeah, we know. We watched it. I don't know how to break this to you. New quarterback. Who dis? Very different situation, probably. Like, I don't know. This is, as we watch a Minnesota game on a Thursday night, week 1, it reminds me of Nebraska, Minnesota last year, where Nebraska has a lead in the fourth quarter and just mystifyingly starts giving the ball back to Minnesota. And Minnesota winds up winning that game at the last second. The way Colorado blew open the Nebraska game last year was Nebraska turning the ball over a bunch of times near the end of the first half. This will be better. Zach in the chat, North Dakota State is better than UTEP. That's true. That's true. But I think Nebraska might be better than North Dakota State. Don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Hurley again. Colorado's a pass to run team. The interior line is not up to par. I think they're a pass to pass team. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know that I would trust them to run the ball at all. And that's the problem you saw at the end of the game. And I tweeted this out because they actually threw the ball a couple of times as they're trying to bleed the clock, but it was very short, kind of high confidence, essentially aerial handoffs. But they didn't get anything on those. And so they wound up in a third and long situation, and they throw deep and they get a PI, which isn't a bad idea when you have that big of an athletic advantage between your receivers and their DBs. So they got the PI, and when they do, I'm going, oh, they throw it deep every time. And so they do throw it deep on first down, and it's incomplete. And I'm like, wait, this is why no one would hire me as a coach. Because if they kept throwing it deep, how much time would NDSU have? Like, NDSU ended up having, well, they should have had more time because the refs did screw that up, as many of you keep pointing out in the chat. What about the home cooking with the clock and the missed targeting call? Well, there also was a potential missed targeting call on North Dakota State there at the end, too, with one of the D linemen hitting Shedeur. So we don't know. Like, that one, I'm willing to kind of call a wash. The other one, the clock thing was bad. But the only reason North Dakota State had any time at all was because Colorado threw in that first down. Because subliminally, Pat Shurmur listened to Coach Andy sitting at home. Never do that, by the way. Never listen to me. Whatever my instinct is probably wrong. But it's going to be fun to watch this. Like, those Colorado games are going to be interesting, but I do think it's something to consider as you look at their Big 12 schedule, because you saw Cam Miller, who is a good running quarterback, a veteran quarterback, but KJ Jefferson is a better running quarterback. Avery Johnson might be the best running quarterback. Noah Fafita can move around, but he's got T-Mac, who's an absolute freak, who will be a problem for Colorado's DBs to cover one-on-one, because he's a problem for every DB to cover one-on-one. Trent with a really interesting idea. I like this. Why not create a Percy Harvin type package with Travis Hunter? I would rather try that in short yardage. I'm kind of with you, Trent. So I covered the Percy Harvin teams at Florida. I was a beat writer for the Tampa paper at the time. And I remember sort of the frustration early in Percy's freshman year from Urban Meyer and Dan Mullen about, okay, how do we get him the ball more? And then they just decided, you know what, we'll line him up at running back and just hand it to him because he's the best player on the field. So let's let him be the best player on the field. And it worked. It worked. If you go back to the end of that season, there's a play in the SEC championship game where Percy lines up at running back. They hand off to him. He just, one cut and he's gone. Touchdown against Arkansas. That really was one of the things that turned the tide in the game. Now, there was a muffed punt that Florida recovered that also helped turn the tide. But like, the idea of you have this incredibly special, once in a generation type athlete, why not just force feed him? That's a legitimate, great idea, Trent. Like, don't listen to Andy. Coach Andy doesn't know what he's doing. Coach Trent. Heck yeah. Corporate Duck again. CU has to figure out the run game. Seemingly gave up on it halfway through. I agree. Now, again, they had the one Charlie Offerdahl run late in the game on a 3rd and 1 to convert, but they just didn't have confidence. And you saw it. You saw it at the end of the game when they did have to run clock. They still didn't hand off at first. They were throwing those short short passes that they felt like were pretty easy completions, which they were, but then they still ended up having to throw deep. And then after they throw deep and throw incomplete on that first down, then they try to run the ball, and it went nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. U Green says the Dylan Raiola Heisman campaign starts next week. He's going to have to compete with Travis Hunter. Like, everybody who wants to win the Heisman is going to have to compete with Travis Hunter. I don't care if it's a Paul Hornung thing. Like, Paul Hornung won the Heisman when Notre Dame was just god-awful. I don't care how many games Colorado wins if Travis Hunter is doing this. Like, he needs to be a Heisman finalist and probably a Heisman winner if he does this game after game after game after game. If he can keep this up, that would be just amazing. IMZG, all the CU haters pointing out everything they did bad when they still won, but not to mention North Dakota State also had many mistakes, but North Dakota State won. No one would be speaking about their mistakes. No, because they're an FCS team. Colorado has 22 more scholarships than they do. Like, there would have been no excuse. Yes, North Dakota State's good. Yes, you probably shouldn't schedule that game. 22 more scholarships. So, yeah, there's a reason everybody would have done that. Bad quality. Andy, we got to fix refs in these games. 5 games in a row, teams playing Tennessee didn't get one live ball penalty last year. It's sad that the refs will change outcomes of these games. I don't think they changed the outcome of this game. Did North Dakota State get screwed out of a few seconds? Yes. Would North Dakota State have scored a touchdown? We don't know. They got tackled short of the line, short of the end zone. If they had one more play, we'll see. But they also would not have been running the Hail Mary at that point if they had a few more seconds. They would have tried to get a little closer. Gamer D, NDSU is 6-1 versus FBS teams. What are you talking? Does not change 63 scholarships. Like, if you have 85, you have no excuse. Minnesota just fumbled to itself, and they're in the red zone. Down 2, 5 minutes to go. Do I keep vamping till we get to the end of this game too? Maybe. This was a fun night. We can talk about some of the other games too, because I watched a lot of Western Carolina, NC State. That was a close game, much closer than NC State wanted it to be. You know, Grayson McCall, a guy who didn't throw a ton of interceptions in his career when he was at Coastal Carolina, had a pretty costly one early in that game it was almost a pick six that led to a score for Western Carolina. Again, Cole Gonzalez did a great job. So Cole Gonzalez, by the way, the son of University of Florida's receivers coach, Billy Gonzalez. So he's at Western Carolina playing for Kerwin Bell, a former Florida quarterback. A lot of Florida flavor, but the Western Carolina thing, I kind of figured they were going to be able to hang for a bit because Cole is the preseason Southern Conference Player of the Year. He was amazing last year. So Cade Bell was their offensive coordinator at Western Carolina last year. He did so well that Pittsburgh hired him as its OC, and then he took their running back with him too. So I had a feeling that Kerwin Bell, who is Cade's dad, who has won a D2 national title at Valdosta State, that he'd be able to call a pretty good game, and that, you know, just losing Cade Bell was not going to be the end of that offense being good. And so I imagine in the FCS, they're going to be a pretty effective offense. But Grayson McCall, toward the end of the game, you saw him get quite a bit better. And then NC State finally gets the run game going, forces the ball into the end zone to take that 31-21 lead. And then they start to feel comfortable. But it's going to be interesting. Deion in the chat, back to the Colorado thing, says Colorado's D-line is terrible. I do not think they're terrible. I don't think they're terrible. I thought they played the run very well. I don't think they contained Cam Miller very well. I think you got to get that guy on the ground. Now, granted, North Dakota State didn't get Shedeur Sanders on the ground That was how teams beat them last year. So we will find out if they can get him on the ground. Elevation, Colorado's D-line is pretty good. No. So it's between what Deion said and what Elevation said. It's kind of just there right now. Got to get a better pass rush. Got to contain the quarterback. Can't let him slip free. But very good against the design run. So if you're not playing a dynamic quarterback, then you're in pretty good shape. Like if you're playing a team that relies on handing off, that D-line is probably going to be very good for you. But if you're playing a quarterback who can move in the pocket, and again, we've gone through the schedule. We've mentioned guys who can. We don't know what Dylan Raiola will be next week. We do know DeQuan Finn can move for Baylor. We definitely know KJ Jefferson can run for UCF. We definitely know Avery Johnson can run for Kansas State. We definitely know Cam Rising can move around really well for Utah. We definitely know Jalen Daniels can move around really well for Kansas. So if they get the QB1 that all of these teams are planning to have, that part has got to get fixed or they're going to have huge problems. Because I don't think it's going to be as easy to throw the ball on most of these teams as it was on North Dakota State. They had such a mismatch athletically with Travis Hunter, with Jimmy Horn, that they just, they were going to have coverage busts or they were going to have a situation where guys just could not keep up. And you saw like 2 of Travis Hunter's 3 touchdowns were, I'm just a better athlete than you. Bad Quality asked me, what's the biggest thing you take from NC State's game to carry into the Tennessee game? Probably that they got to take care of the ball. And they got to protect Grayson McCall because obviously Western Carolina is not going to get after him the way that Tennessee is. James Pierce Jr. is one of the best pass rushers in the country. And if they can force, because you saw some situations where you had a little bit of miscommunication, like the interception that I'm talking about early in the game was a miscommunication between Grayson McCall and Casey Concepcion, who is their best player, by the way. He's fun to watch. Fun to watch him drag tacklers and just do all kinds of crazy stuff. But in that particular situation, we weren't in the meeting, so we don't know who was at fault, but somebody wasn't on the same page as somebody else. And that's what happened. By the way, Minnesota has now taken a 1-point lead with a field goal. Omarion Hampton, the great North Carolina running back, trying to get the Tar Heels back in a position to get this lead back so they can win this game. So we got games coming down to the wire. This has been a slobber knocker. Now, North Carolina, they wouldn't tell us who they were going to start at quarterback. Finally, it's Max Johnson. He's your guy. He gets hurt. He's out of the game. Connor Harrell, who had competed with him, he comes in. And we just saw Connor Harrell on an RPO kind of pop pass thing where he just escaped pressure and found a guy wide open down the left sideline. He faked a handoff to Hampton. He's rolling to his left. There's a guy in his face, and he gets it down the left sideline, and North Carolina's in business, everybody. We're going to hang. We're going to hang until North Carolina finishes this game. So while we're here, while we're waiting to see what happens in this next 2 minutes and 30 seconds of football time, remember, we do have a 2-minute timeout. Don't you dare call it the 2-minute warning. It's the 2-minute timeout. And I noticed when they hit a 2-minute timeout in the Colorado-North Dakota State game, it was a 3-minute and 20-second TV media timeout. So we may be here longer than 2 minutes, but North Carolina is running this thing down to the 2-minute timeout, not the 2-minute warning, and both teams have 3 timeouts. But so let's talk. Let's talk, chat. We got games Friday. We got games Saturday. You tell me what games you want to talk about. Matt in the chat. Andy, it's a 2-minute warning. I know it is. I'm going to call it the 2-minute warning too. I just thought it was funny. Like I was talking to John McDade, the supervisors or officials in the SEC. He's like, 2-minute timeout. 2-minute timeout. No, it's the 2-minute warning. It's been the 2-minute warning forever. Matt, the Friday games are awful. Well, yeah, okay. I don't expect Oklahoma Temple to be close. Maybe TCU Stanford. TCU Stanford's intriguing. It's late. Can everybody on the East Coast stay up for that? Bad quality in the chat. If Miami beats Florida, do you change your Georgia Tech pick to win the ACC? I think there are a couple things that can change that pick. Georgia Clemson, like if Clemson were to beat Georgia, that also might make me change my mind. Miami beating Florida handily might make me change my mind. Miami looking competent, like just competent, maybe not. But if Miami looks really good, yeah, I might think about it. Matt, why did Georgia Clemson get the noon slot? That seems insane to me as a biased Georgia fan. Well, because I think they feel like Miami, Florida, and Notre Dame, Texas A&M are going to be more competitive games. It's not an insult to Georgia, Matt. It's actually a compliment to Georgia. I think they're insulting Clemson here. I think they're saying they don't think Clemson is going to be able to hang with Georgia. And I think that's now, whether that's true or not, we're going to find out. I've said this multiple times. If you read the written version of Dear Andy this week, I got a question about this. And I do think like if Clemson gets its doors blown off in this game, then everything we've said about Dabo and the transfer portal comes home to roost. Because Georgia and Clemson were recruiting at fairly similar levels before Georgia's run of national titles started, before the rules changed. I think Georgia was probably recruiting a little bit better. Clemson's run of great quarterbacks had ended. But they were close. But then the rules changed, and Kirby Smart decided to take part in this era of college football, and Dabo Swinney didn't. So if Kirby Smart had any sort of deficiency on his roster, or even like a perceived deficiency on his roster, he went and got somebody. Dabo, thus far, has not done that. So what we would expect to see, again, I don't know if this is what we will see, but what we would expect to see is a much more complete Georgia roster, a deeper Georgia roster. So if Clemson has somebody that maybe isn't quite ready for prime time, Georgia's going to pick on him. This is what NFL teams do. They find the one guy and they just pick on him over and over and over again. And if it's one or two guys at Clemson, well, that makes all the difference. Like Georgia tried to replace those one or two guys in the transfer portal. Bad quality says, let's not overthink this. Georgia has a QB and Clemson doesn't. At least Klubnik hasn't shown it yet. And I think that's fair. I mean, Cade Klubnik was a second-year player last year. He didn't start until the very end of his freshman season. So I don't know that we've completely given up on him yet. But yeah, the idea of him playing against Georgia's defense while Carson Beck plays against Clemson's defense, you feel a little more confident in Carson Beck, even though Clemson has a very good defense. Michael in the chat on Colorado. 1 sack against an FCS team. Come on, y'all win by 5 points. SEC teams beat all their FCS teams by 50-plus points. Get humbled. That's not entirely true. There have been some times. There was a Citadel, South Carolina game. There was a Georgia Southern Florida game. There was a game Florida won in Dan Mullen's last year where Samford hung 50 on him at home. Florida did win, but Samford hung 50 on him. So let's not generalize with all the FCS on FBS games. North Carolina facing a 3rd and 5. Connor Harrell goes down. It's going to be time to kick. Remember, Minnesota had all 3 timeouts going into this, so they got the clock stopped by calling their second timeout. North Carolina is going to try to kick field goal to take the lead. This is great. This is what we were signing up for. This is what we wanted. We wanted close games. You know, I was hoping maybe Western Carolina, NC State would go down to the wire. It did not. But it was a game in the 4th quarter. Colorado, North Dakota State was a very fun game, very competitive, came down to the very end. And North Carolina, Minnesota is not disappointing. Can we make Minnesota like an official Thursday night week 1 team forever? Like, this is 2 bangers in a row for these guys. I like that. I like that. Let's keep Minnesota in this spot. Now we got to find out if they're going to win, though. And North Carolina has made its field goal, and now they lead 19-17 with 1:44 to go. All right. Oh, our friend Carter. Power Hour, LSU with Carter the Power. I've done his show before. He says, Andy, my man, you coming to Vegas for that LSU USC game? I wish, Carter. I wish I was coming to Vegas. I'm so excited about that game. While we sit through yet another timeout and figure out if North Carolina is going to be able to beat Minnesota here. That game, LSU and USC, is fascinating to me. Think about this. Lincoln Riley leaves Oklahoma to go to USC. Brian Kelly leaves Notre Dame to go to LSU on the same day. On the same day. They both have very good first years. Like, Caleb Williams won the Heisman at USC. If he doesn't tweak his, I believe it was a knee or was it an ankle, in the Pac-12 championship game against Utah, they might have been going to the playoff. I don't know. I don't know if they would have been able to tackle anybody from Utah in the second half still. But that team was pretty good. LSU won the SEC West in Brian Kelly's first year. It felt like they both took steps back last year. Kelly, not as big of a step back because he had Jaden Daniels winning the Heisman, and that made up for one of the worst defenses LSU's ever had. Caleb Williams wasn't as good last year because I don't think the talent around him was as good. I think losing Jordan Addison hurt a lot, but that USC defense was still bad. So in both of these cases, you've got revamped defensive staffs. Both of them have hired new defensive coordinators. It's Blake Baker from Missouri for LSU. It's D'Anton Lynn from UCLA for USC. D'Anton Lynn probably got more players did get more players out of the portal. So personnel-wise, he went and got a few more guys to kind of do what he wants. LSU kind of standing a little more pat. Now, we had the Brian Kelly saying we don't buy players when they were asking about why they didn't take any defensive linemen out of the transfer portal in the spring. It's not they don't buy players, they do, but they didn't like the asking price of those particular players. They didn't feel like what they wanted to make in NIL dollars was worth paying them for what they might get out of them. So you've got Blake Baker, and TJ says Blake Baker is a massive upgrade at defensive coordinator. But the question is, does Blake Baker moving the pieces around the board differently than Matt House, does that instantly make them better? We're going to find out. And D'Anton Lynn, same thing. Like he's brought in new players, but I keep saying with these Lincoln Riley teams, is it a cultural thing? Do they not practice defense the way you should practice defense? Because a lot of the air raid coaches don't. They just, the coaches from the air raid tree don't always practice defense the way like Georgia practices defense or Michigan practices defense or Alabama practices defense. And it shows. It shows at the end of games. It shows as seasons go on and teams become poorer tacklers because they're not working on it all the time. The truth says LSU survives USC, at least I hope. I think LSU should win this game. I think LSU's offensive line should be the difference in this game. They should be able to control the ball on the ground. They should be able to protect Garrett Nussmeier. Now, I know Chris Hilton is hurt. He's got a bone bruise, so they say he's going to try to play, but they're not sure if he's going to play. And then you got Kyron Lacey. You got CJ Daniels, the transfer from Liberty, who should be able to catch the ball. But will they be replacements for Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr.? I don't know. I mean, those were first-round receivers. I don't know that they have 2 first-round receivers now. But Nussmeier definitely seems to be better. Zach, DeBoer is the only CFB air raid coach I've seen respect defense. Well, that's because he's not an air raid coach. It's because he doesn't run the air raid. So that would be your reason right there. Meanwhile, we've got Minnesota trying to drive the ball. It looked like they had a big play. It was called back for a hold. But they're feeling pretty confident, feeling like they're in some field goal range. But they're going to try to get it a little bit closer. And try to set up a walk-off. That'd be a big win for PJ Fleck and company. With North Carolina, I'm not sure how we're supposed to feel about North Carolina this year. The defense has certainly looked better, but they're playing against a Minnesota team that's playing without Darius Taylor, who was, as a freshman, averaged 133 rushing yards a game. Bad Quality asks, if Mike Elko wins in commanding fashion, how does that change your perception? And if Nico carries UT to the semis, does he win a Heisman? Well, the Heisman will already be handed out before the semis. So whether they win that first round game or if they have a bye and win the quarterfinal, it doesn't matter because the Heisman will have already been given out. So that doesn't really change much. In terms of my perception of Texas A&M, I think they're going to be pretty decent. Like Vegas loves them. Vegas has Texas A&M's win total 8.5. They've favored Texas A&M in this North Carolina game since the line opened. So I think there's a good chance that Mike Elko has them winning quite a few games this year. All right, Minnesota has centered the ball. 4 seconds to go. Third down. We got a college kickers man situation. North Carolina has all 3 timeouts. So I think we can assume that there's going to be some icing going on here. Now, Minnesota has stoinked one of these. I do love a kicker wearing 99. I always feel like it's in honor of Rick Wild Thing Vaughn. But what do we? So Minnesota uses his final timeout. Now, North Carolina, can North Carolina? I need to ask an official this because they did add the same timeout rule that the NFL has, the no double timeouts. It's a delay of game, but I think you can't call your own timeout 2 in a row. I don't know that. I think you can call a timeout coming off another team's timeout. Bad Quality points out, this time last year, Mac Brown grabbed Shane Beamer by the throat. Yeah, North Carolina just went crazy on South Carolina. Sacked them like crazy. Dragan Kesic, the lefty, is lining up for this field goal. It's a 47-yard attempt to win the ball game. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what we wanted. We wanted it to come down to one play, and it comes down to one play. Timeout, North Carolina. Called that one. But this is everything we want. This is everything we want in our Thursday night appetizer. When I was in college, Thursday night was party night. Like I always felt like we did more on Thursday night than we did on Friday nights because the bar beer prices were a lot more on Friday nights. So I always loved a good Thursday night football game. Oh, Bad Quality pointing out that no, he literally grabbed Shane Beamer by the throat post game in the middle of the field. Oh, do I remember that? See, the only thing I remember from that's the stadium in Charlotte is when coaches get dunked with mayo at the end of the game. So like Neil Brown last year, Shane Beamer the year before. I just assume when you win a game in that stadium, you get dumped with mayo. All right. Dragan is back. His left foot is ready to connect. 47-yard attempt. What's going to happen? He hooked it. No good. No good. If you were a golfer, the second that came off the club head, you'd be like, ooh, But something felt a little off. And then he'd be like, oh, no. And then you're in the lake. And that's where Minnesota is right now. Minnesota is in the water hazard. 1917 North Carolina. We got a walk-off win. But North Carolina is the one walking off. College kickers. College kickers. We're back, everybody. It is officially college football season. TJ, not a good swing thought heading into the weekend. Nope. I would suggest do not watch the replay of that kick if you have a tee time in the next 2 days. Just don't. Welcome back, everybody. Enjoy the weekend. We'll talk to you Saturday.